Hi, I'm Erin, and today I'm going to talk to you about 3 queer sports romances. The 3 books for today are Cleat by Meryl Wilsner, which is published by Piatkus, Fire and Ice by Rachel Spangler, which is published by Bywater Books, which is a particular lesbian imprint, and Gravity by Tal Bauer, which is self-published and published by Amazon On Demand. To begin with, romance as a genre makes promises. All genres make promises, but romance's promise is that we have a love story at the centre of the book that we're reading, and that at the end of the book, we end up with a happy ending for our couple, either a happily ever after or a happy for now. We know those broad beats of the story. What makes romance reading really interesting and engaging and something that people come back to is all the different ways and the different premises that take us to that story ending. Now, sports romance as a subgenre of romance does a few things and has a few opportunities that we miss out in other contemporary romances. So typically, but not always, but typically sports romances are contemporary romances. So they're set in or around our current time. The 3 that I'm talking about are all set now, whenever now is. We have at least one person who's really driven or focused on their sport, typically. Sometimes both the romantic interests are sports people. So we have someone with a drive. We get some of the benefits of a workplace romance where people spend their days together. So if they're both playing sport or if they're connected to the sport, then, they're spending time together when they're at work, and they're able to spend leisure time together as well. They also have a lot more leisure time. And one thing that sports romance gives us that is sometimes missing from other contemporary romances or is harder to achieve are stakes. So when we talk about stakes in romance, we're talking about how important or the impact that setting, context, plot points, the magnitude of the impact that those things have on our characters. So if we think about a regular contemporary romance, people have jobs. If they don't like their job, they can get a new job. If they don't like where they're living, they can find somewhere else. Sometimes the stakes are added in and out of books with various levels of poverty or wealth, or some other forms of manipulation or emotional challenges. And I think that manipulation can make people quite uncomfortable. What sports romance gives us is stakes from the get-go. So people who play professional sport or high level of amateur sport, they take sport really seriously. Particularly if you're playing, women's sport or a sport that is not very well funded, it means a lot. People have given up a lot to be there, so their sport means a lot to them. So we have automatic stakes. So, there's something powerful driving these people, which is something that can be a bit harder to find in other contemporary romances, or harder to do with authenticity. When it comes to queer romance, in real life, there are a lot of queer athletes. There are sports where it's more accepted to be out than others. In fact, Cleat opens with a Megan Rapinoe quote: "You can't win a championship without gays on your team. It's pretty much never been done before, ever." That's science right there. The thing that queer sports romance gives us is the opportunity for sports where there isn't really strong queer representation. So sports like ice hockey in Australia, sports like rugby union or rugby league, or even men's soccer as opposed to women's soccer, or men's football as opposed to women's football. It gives an opportunity to see queer people represented in these sports, being out and living their lives, and potentially it just not being a big deal. What we know about them is their height and their weight and their junior club, and the fact that, they're bisexual or they're gay or they're a lesbian. I think we don't see a lot of trans sport romance, and I think that's because trans athletes are really marginalised in sport. I'm hoping that will be one of the next frontiers that we see in this space of romance, because I do think that romance pushes the boundaries on this more than other genres, And so I probably am someone who looks to romance as a genre to find ways to challenge the status quo and to normalise love being love and romance being romance. In terms of the 3 books that I've picked today, in the first one we have Cleat. So Cleat is a lesbian romance where we have Grace, who is a veteran on the women's US football team, and we have Phoebe, who is a rookie and who's just finished college at a really small college, and she is drafted to a major league team, and she is invited to train at a US women's training camp where she meets Grace. There's a really strong attraction. Straight away, we've got the stakes of getting into the team. Both of these people really care a lot in different ways. While I call Grace a veteran, she's only 26. So, which is something that comes up sometimes. Like, we're not talking about someone in the twilight of their career. She is right in the middle of her career. Performing well in their professional team. There is trying to get into the US team for Phoebe, and then bubbling along there is this really strong attraction that they have to each other. They bring in different baggage, but I think, straight away we've got those stakes. Then in Fire and Ice, we have Max. So Max is actually a sports journalist working for a network, covered all the big sports, and by that we mean men's sports where they're paid lots of money. So covered hockey, covered football, all of those kinds of things. And she broke a story that turned out not to be true. So she broke a scandal and it wasn't true. So she has been punished and sent down to cover women's curling. And Callie Mulligan is the captain of the US women's B team. So there is a curling ranking. And Callie is the captain of her team. She is incredibly committed. She is incredibly driven. We've got stakes right there where you can't send 2 curling teams to the Olympics. So we're 2 years out from an Olympics in this book, and talking about all of the things that these sports really on the outer edge of sponsorship do to get their players exposure, experience, to get them to the place where they need to be so that they can really succeed in their sport. So we have 2 characters with 2 different stakes. Dealing with the shame of not performing professionally is, trying to claw her way back into what is seen as the top level of her profession. And then we've got Callie, who is incredibly talented, built a team of her friends. They can't train together very often. And so they, all the workarounds they have around that. Callie won't take on more permanent work so that she can focus on what she sees as her number 1 job, which is being the captain of the curling team and the person who throws the rocks. I've not used the right language there. I picked up this book because who doesn't want to read a female-female romance about curling? Amazing. Amazing. Third book is Gravity by Tal Bauer, which is a male-male hockey romance. Where this is different from some of the others is that Tal Bauer himself is a gay man. Tal Bauer writes male-male romance where he guarantees a happy ending, but in all the ones I've read, there's a very, very big dramatic twist. In Gravity, we have Hunter, who is one of those middling players on a professional team. Like, he's fine, but he's not a star. No one's wearing a jersey with his name on it. And we have Bryce, who is the captain of the Montreal Étoiles. And Bryce is a Quebecois who has come up from the country as a kid, this incredible talent. He's a beautiful ice hockey player. A range of circumstances lead to Hunter and Bryce playing together in like an all-stars weekend, which when they play together on the ice, it's magic. It lifts. They play this beautiful hockey. They're playing 3-a-side. The third person isn't even there. They're so in sync. So, we have this lifting the quality of the game for these 2 professional players. In professional sports, similar to people striving for the Olympics, the stakes are pretty clear. Let's try and win a premiership. But these other opportunities arise. And so Hunter and Bryce play this beautiful hockey together. And then before they go home, there is a brief shared kiss. And then a really awkward reaction to that. And Bryce goes home and Hunter goes back to his team. So Hunter goes back to, coasting through the middle in life in sport. And Bryce goes home, but he's lost his form. And so his team organised for Hunter to be traded to them in an attempt to find that magic again. 3 books, set out the stakes really straightforwardly. In that way that sports romance does it. None of these books particularly deal with homophobia. It's very much focused on These are not coming out books. These are not sort of gay awakening books. These are books where people find each other in a few different ways, already comfortable in who they are and who they're attracted to. And so the love story just grows from there. So I think that is something that we see more in queer romance. In literary fiction, often someone's queerness is used as a plot point. At this point is really diminishing to the queer characters and the strength of someone's storytelling. There are so many other ways to drive a story forward and to create tension or stakes or rationales. I don't want to suggest that we should hide away from the fact that homophobia exists and people live with horrific experiences of bigotry, but I also think it's okay to do both. It's okay to represent, someone who is just accepted by their team, people that love them, just want them to be happy and be able to live their full selves with the people who love them the most. And I think that's something that all three of these books do really well. They're three queer sports romances, which I absolutely love. Gravity is probably one of my favourite romance novels of all time. Gravity is available on Kindle Unlimited for people who have a subscription, but you can also buy it. And the same with these other two books. I don't know that they're all available on audio if that is how you read. If you read romance, or if you like books about sport, like fictional books about sport, really think about why aren't you reading these? And if you read romance, why aren't you reading queer romance? And if you read queer romance, are you reading lesbian romance? Sapphic romances are neglected, chosen to talk about romances written by authors who have the same sexual orientation as their characters, because I think that, there's lots of great authors out there, but great to highlight these ones who people may not have heard of. They're my three queer sports romances. If you want high stakes, if you want efforts at communication, and if you want some love in your life, check them out. Do you read romance? Do you read sports romance? Do you ever tap into the discourse around romance and wonder what it gives us that other books aren't? Thank you all, and see you next time.